Keep Routt Wild is a community organization dedicated to wildlife and wildlife. There you go. Our mission is to promote practices for the benefit of conserving the Yankton Valley for future generations. Get shorter. We do this through education, engagement with public and private entities, conservation through informed science. We're doing that. All of those things with this, engaged with SMR. They asked us to review their wildlife plan. We can comment on that. We specifically have engaged in this due to the precedential nature that will set with under the new Unified Development Code for Routt County with regard to wildlife. We have not taken a position in favor or against this development. We're here to look at wildlife impacts, analyze those, and try and help set a precedent for future developments if our metrics can do that. So under the UDC, the purpose stated is that protect areas of priority wildlife habitat, including migration corridors, areas for breeding, feeding, and living. They discuss mitigation, take actions that result in habitat to uplift for impacted wildlife populations, equal to or exceeding the proposed disturbance. That's a really interesting statement, right? It's making that zero statement. So UDC does have some really good policies within it. Their hierarchy of avoid, minimize, and mitigate. Obviously, avoidance of high priority habitats is best. And you can't do that. Mitigation or minimization, which can be things like seasonal closures, and then specific mitigation projects if none of that above works, which should be improvement projects, preferably on site when not possible off site. And then beyond that, compensatory fee that can be used for a future project, hopefully a lasting project, could be acceptable. Other good policies in the UDC include pre-development plan, wildlife mitigation plan, preservation of wildlife corridors and habitat connectivity, to prevent wildlife harassment, and good wildlife friendly fencing policies. So here's a map of the SMR development plan. And we use this as a starting point for some of our calculations in determining the impacts of wildlife. We started with just a general outline of the property, and then we overlay that on top of CPW high priority habitat maps. You can see the elk winter concentrations in the blue hash. The green blob, you've all heard to see, but that's all production area. The white lots represented on there are those that fall outside of high priority habitat. The ones that are in red do fall within areas of high priority habitat. So Keep Routt Wild did a number of evaluations using the Routt County decision support tool that Routt Recreation Conservation Roundtable helped develop. Looked at a number of habitats and species, and the ones that stood out the most were elk production area and elk winter range. I mentioned before that we had the opportunity to review the SMR wildlife plan. Our comments were posted in the pilot. We're welcome to review them there. That plan is now being revised. I expect that will reflect both the comments that Keep Routt Wild and Parks and Wildlife. You've heard Keep Routt Wild speak a lot about elk. It's an interesting species because it represents a lot of equally sensitive animals. Elk are a migratory animal that use a variety of landscapes, like many other species, likely also on the landscape, they avoid humans. And the research is there, and well researched, and the disturbances are measurable. Dr. Michael Wisdom did a radio college studies that we're going to apply to our calculations, and he had a really neat quote that I agree a lot with, which is, when elk avoid humans, you basically reduce what we call carrying capacity, the number of animals that can make a living on the landscape. So that's the slide I think we saw before, isn't it? Yeah. So to calculate high priority habitat, we have to have a starting point, what distance the animals avoided development. Those of you that are familiar with our organization have likely seen our calculations based on the wisdom studies before. The graphic on the right depicts some disturbance distances based on vehicle traffic, human traffic, to these sites. For this purpose, we've elected to use the human disturbance. And elk observed in that study would avoid humans at a distance of 547 meters. That's based on two disturbances a day. So if somebody's walking in the morning and again in the evening on their property. We can then take that distance and apply it from the property or the building envelope boundaries, the lot boundaries. And that's represented in that kind of yellow-orange color there. You can see that those disturbances extend beyond the property line of SMR. And then also, if you look at the elk severe winter range, blue arrow there, it points to an area where the lots are spaced out. Maybe the area in that is considered open space, but it's not conserved habitat. So in calculating the high priority habitat, we have the orange blob, and then the elk winter range in the blue hash, and again the elk calving production in the green hash. We excluded impacts from Highway 14 or County Road 14 and County Road 16. That's because we want to see the impacts from this development, not what impacts total on the property, right? That's new. So when we take all those calculations combined, we come up with a number of almost 2,000 disturbed acres. It's a number substantially higher than the 569 that was presented in the original development plan or the wildlife plan from SMR. So a few observations from this. We discussed that number being much higher than the original estimates. It makes it difficult, I think, to try and mitigate on site. There's neither quality or quantity of habitat there. Conservation easements, there's one already existing on the properties. That's an easement. That's great. Should be a part of any wildlife plan. But that doesn't really create habitat uplift, right? It just conserves what's already there. There's mitigation maybe that can happen on those that improve it, but it doesn't change the net value. It's interesting, SMR has done a great job of avoiding certain aspects of wildlife. And one of those is the wetland areas in some of the more sensitive areas. The challenge in that is that they've avoided an environmental study at a federal level, so we don't have rigorous documentation of what those impacts could be. There's also a public parcel beyond parcel from Grassberry Creek. They're offering that they'd like to have public access to that, which I think a lot of the community would like to see. It's great to have public access to public property. But by doing that, we're going to increase human activity on that landscape, right? So by increasing human activity, we'll increase wildlife disturbance. That's right now it's difficult to access, and the animals are using that as a bit of a sanctuary. So to make this work, the trail would either need to be eliminated, or a comprehensive management plan would need to be put in place for seasonal closures. And even then, trail closures may not be enough. CPW research shows that human activity during calving season can result in 40% reduction in calf survivability, with each disturbance season potentially leading to a 5% loss. And that's mainly due to predation, not starvation or any of that. But if you can see the graphic in the upper left there, you'll see that there's a significant, there's a certain amount of calf activity and susceptibility beyond June 30th. Typical wildlife closures are June 30th, but that doesn't necessarily mean that instituting a June 30th closure that we're really protecting the full picture. So there's still an impact. I'll also note that on the right photo there, all summer concentration, you can see a blob that's kind of in, I guess, pink or red. That's not recognized by Colorado Parks and Wildlife as high priority habitat. It is habitat, it's used by the elk. And as we apply increasing pressures to the winter concentrations, as summer areas become increasingly more important. So that's not been included in our calculation. Obviously on the Raspberry Creek Trail, the CPW is building trails with wildlife in mind, recommends dogs on leash as well. So in summary, the UDC goal is to result in habitat uplift for impacted wildlife populations equal to or exceeding the proposed disturbances. Again, that's maybe a little bit of a challenge to achieve, particularly on site. SMAR has done a good job where they can of avoiding synthesis of the wetland banks. Certainly the grouse slats that exist on the property and Golden Eagle Nest, and they deserve credit for that. Conservation easements, they can be part of the mitigation plan, but they don't deliver up. So when we look at SMR and avoid, minimize, mitigate hierarchy there, we see them as falling in the category of needing to go off-site. And I'm not sure exactly what that looks like. To meet the requirements of the UDC, SMR is going to need to either change their development plan or propose very expensive actions such as off-site habitat rehabilitation plus conservation easements and or a compensatory fee.